When we visited the Aeta community, the pictures were really nice too, through the film camera.
Dope, we'll check it out. And, well, welcome! We are now rolling.
Nice.
Welcome to the Filipino garage, which isn't a garage anymore because we are not in the old studio, but welcome, you are now in the Filipino dorm.
It's a really nice dorm.
Thank you. It is a single. It is worth the work. And I am grateful to actually have it. Could you give us a little context right now? You are Raquel and you are going to share with us what?
Yeah, so my name is Raquel and I'm a third year at UC Berkeley.
What's your major?
Studying social welfare.
Oh, that's a cool major.
Yeah, I know someone else who's doing it. But yeah, Kuya Chris invited me onto the podcast to talk about my experience in the Philippines, just because I also haven't had time to unpack everything myself. So I feel like this podcast will be helpful in that way, and also get to share my experiences with everyone else. So
just in general context, you went on an exposure trip with Kabataan.
Yeah, Kabataan Alliance.
This last summer, 2018.
Yeah, I think we stayed there for a little over 3 weeks, from I think the second week of July to the first week of August. So it was a pretty long trip.
And then what was the purpose and everything?
The purpose, at least my personal purpose, was just to really see all of the issues going on firsthand, because it's different when you're looking or hearing about all of these things through the textbook or through a professor or through the news. I wanted to see it for myself firsthand, and I know Kabataan Alliance just does this yearly and annually. So you actually and Elizabeth have convinced me to go on the trip, so that's what really pushed me to go on it. I remember being really nervous. I'm is this something that I really want to do? I also had that dilemma where it was I'm Filipino American, so why do I care about the issues out there, What
made you kind of make that decision to go? Where was that initial interest, and then how did that become finally a decision to go?
I think this is a very common narrative among Filipino Americans, but growing up I've never truly felt Filipino, or I didn't even know what it meant to be Filipino, yet alone Filipino American. So I was exposed to the food, the language, but anything deeper or further than that, it never got to that point. So it was when I got to college where I actually had the opportunity to be around people who were Filipino identifying. I come from Pittsburgh, California, so that city is really diverse in a sense where I was surrounded by POC, but there isn't a really big or strong Filipino community out there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there was a Philam club, but I wanted to distance myself away from the culture, so I didn't really join the club either. But when I got to college, I think that's when I started being homesick, and I feel your culture are remnants of home, so that's what I was kind of looking for. So I was doing my research about UC Berkeley and what types of clubs are being offered, because I was just trying to find a community out here, because the university is really big. So I looked it up, and I saw there was 8 different PIL orgs. I'm that's pretty intense. So I ended up joining PAA through the fall internship program. I think it was my first year, my first semester here. So it was fall 2016.
So PAA shout out is Filipino American Alliance.
Yeah, it's Pilipinx now.
Pilipinx,
yeah.
Okay.
So Pilipinx American Alliance, and it's 50th year, but yeah, I ended up interning for them.
This year is the 50th year?
50th year.
Oh, 2018.
Yeah. The Third World Liberation Front is 50 years old. Yeah. So was PA, because it was founded from the
Was
movement.
it founded in this fall semester?
The PA? Oh, I'm not sure.
But it was 68. When it was founded. Okay.
But yeah, I ended up interning the fall semester, and I distinctly remember just being at the first intern meeting, and the topic of discussion was overseas Filipino workers. And I mean, my dad was an overseas Filipino worker too. Like, he worked in Saudi Arabia when he was 18 to like provide for his family back home in the Philippines. But I didn't really understand or like got to really know like what it meant to be an OFW, or like what they even were, like what the significance of it was. So I remember like just walking in and like instantly feeling like welcomed, because I was a late intern, so I like came in late and they already had like intern meetings, and that's when I think I really knew that this is a community for me, because I was surrounded by folks who were like-minded, and also like they had similar backgrounds. They had similar backgrounds to me, and I never felt like that. Like, I've always felt kind of outcasted, so I felt really welcomed, and that's when I really wanted to be involved in the PIL community, which is why I like stuck with PAA and like am still trying to be more immersed in the community. But then from there, that sparked my interest with like just learning more about like what it does mean to be Filipino, like more of the history and what happened in the Philippines. Like, no one really talks about it, or like at least my parents, they don't talk about like the Marcos regime because they lived under it. They don't really talk about it, or like what life was like back in the Philippines before immigrating. So that pushed me to explore even more. So I ended up enrolling in a class about Filipino American history, and I took it with Catherine Choi, and she's a professor here, and she was the first Filipino tenured professor. So I took a class with her, and she talked a lot about colonialism, and that was the first time I've ever heard about.
Really?
Yeah, Spanish and American colonialism in the Philippines. Like, I've never heard of that.
Damn, and then how old were you? You were 18 or 19?
I was 19 at the time because it was last year. So I lived 19 years of my life not knowing that.
So you never knew that like Spain colonized the Philippines?
Never.
Things like that? Damn,
no.
What was that like experience then?
It was really weird just because it's a lot of unlearning, I think, when you're learning about like your own history. Because then when you, at least with like the American education system, like it's very whitewashed, or like there's a lot of things that are hidden. And you won't get that type of education until you go to college, I think. Or at least that's like a similar experience with other folks. So it was really like, it made me kind of it definitely made me angry, but also really confused, just because this was all new information. And like, I remember back in high school, the only time the Philippines was ever referenced was, I think, like during World War II. I'm not sure for why. I think it was because of like the plantations in Hawaii, but that was like the only time the Philippines was ever covered in my history books. But like going to college and like taking that class with Catherine Choi, that's when I really learned about colonialism, the impacts of imperialism. Also, like, why are there so many nurses, or like Filipino nurses in the United States? Like, I really got to I got to learn the historical backing of everything and like really contextualize it. And that's what really motivated me to go to the Philippines, because I felt a certain way when I was like learning about all of these new topics, you know? So it's like, oh, like, yeah, I know all of this information, but what am I doing with it? And also with like PCN too. Like, I've been involved with PCN for 3 years now, and it's like, yes, we're portraying important narratives and like starting up important dialogue, but it's like, I feel like PCN usually ends once the performance ends, and I really wanted to take the performance beyond the stage. So that's why I decided that this was a good point in my life to go out to the Philippines and really see the issues myself firsthand. Just because, yeah, I have all this knowledge, and then like I gained like all of this information, but now it's time to put that into action and try and actually do something.
Was that your first time in the Philippines?
My first time in the Philippines was when I was, I think, 5 years old, but that was only to visit like family. Like, my family's from Pampanga, and they live in like a really small town. It's called Bagang. Like, even if I like tell other people where they're from, they don't know where it is. That's how small it is. So the only thing that I remember from that trip was just being around family and it being very like happy and joyful. But comparing it to my experience now, like I see that there are multiple layers to the Philippines. Like it's very complex, and I'm thankful that I was able to go on this expo trip just because I think it's different when you're an adult and you like see and experience the Philippines like as someone who's grounded in their identity too.
So what was it then? Like, step me through, bring us back on a little flashback to like that process of like you study imperialism, you study colonialism, and then you get this opportunity to go with Kabataan, right? And so just shout out for context for folks, Kabataan Alliance is like national youth focused coalition, and they send yearly folks to go back on these exposure trips. What do you remember, like a certain point or like a feeling when you made the decision to go on that, like that initial point? What was that like?
I remember so we had like meetings leading up to the trip with Pat actually.
Hey, shout out, episode something, I forgot.
Yeah, so he was our regional director. So he was the one who like interviewed me, read my application, and he facilitated the meetings leading up to the trip. And I remember like finances were an issue. And I was like talking to him about it. I'm like, hey, like I know it's kind of late in the game. Like it was, I think May or June-ish, where I was like, I might have to back out because of finances. And so he was like, that's like a reasonable reason to like want to back out or like need to back out from the trip. But after like really thinking about it and like talking to my parents, I'm like, I really don't want finances to be a reason why I don't go on this trip, you know, like, cause it was something that from the start, like from the get-go when I was talking to you and Liz, like I wanted to go on this trip. Like this is something that I really want. So I didn't want money to get in the way. So like, I remember being really upset for a really long time just because, I mean, there were fundraising opportunities, but I think me and my cohort kind of started too late. So it was really difficult to like raise money in that way. But I was also busting my ass off, like working extra hours at Starbucks to try and pay this trip off on my own. And I was able to pay the program fee on my own through working. But then I ended up talking to my older sister, and she ended up paying for my ticket there. Hey,
shout out Aeta.
Yeah, so she, like, it was so funny because I remember the night where I was like, I'm such a bratty person sometimes. Like, I'm very stubborn and kind of bratty. And I remember she was home, and I was home too for like a weekend because she doesn't live with my parents either. But we were all home, and I remember like she was saying like, if you really want to go on this trip, like I can lend you the money. But I'm stubborn and I wanted to earn the money on my own, so I'm like, nah, like it's all good. Like I just won't go on the trip. And like I remember my parents were like, you need a good reason why you want to go on this trip because right now it doesn't seem like you do. So like I just started crying, and my sister saw how much it meant to me, so she lent me the money. But at that point, like finances were out of the way, and I was talking to Pat again about like my decision, like do I really want to go on the trip? Like I have the money now, but do I really want to go? And I was talking to him about his experience and like what made him want to go, and I think that's what pushed me because he said something that really like hit me. He said that this was just a really, really good point in his life, and if he doesn't go on this trip, like he might miss out on like a really good opportunity and like an eye-opening experience. So I'm like, yeah, I feel like I already had it in me where it was like I already knew it was going to be life-changing. So I think that's what really, like finances aside, I think my conversation with Pat really pushed me to like actually like be solid with my decision, just because like, yeah, this was, I think back then, it was looking back, it was a really good point in my life just because I was grounded in my identity. Like I was finally proud to be Filipino and Filipino American too. So it's like, and then I knew, or like I had a lot of knowledge on like Filipino history and like contemporary issues going on. So I was like at a really good point where it was like, okay, yeah, let's see this firsthand. So,
what made you feel grounded in your Filipino identity and Filipino American?
it was actually the Pil community here, which is, I don't want to say it's a cliche, but it's true. I think without, like, trust me, like, coming in as a freshman, I would have never guessed that I would be involved within the Pil community. Because, again, like, growing up, I was very distant from the culture, even the people. Like, I didn't want any Filipino friends.
Why? Why do you think that was?
I'm not entirely sure. I feel like it has to do, like, if I, like, really think about it, like, these are, like, certain, like, dialogue that I have within myself, or, like, conversations that I have with myself. Like, why did I hate being Filipino? Like, I want to know the source of that. And I think, like, some of the reasons why, like, if I, like, really dig deep, is my mom. It came a lot from my mom. I remember growing up, she would buy, like, papaya soap, and, like, she would bathe me as a child, so, like, she would just be using that, and, like, what is this orange soap? And she was like, it's just to make your skin lighter. I'm like, why? Like, I was confused as a child. And, like, I remember she would pick me up from elementary school, and she would bring, like, an umbrella, and it would be sunny out. I'm like, why are you bringing an umbrella? Like, it's not even raining. She's like, you're gonna get dark. And even till this day, like, I remember coming back to the Philippines, she was like, you're dark, blah, 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 like, you're ugly now. And I'm like, yeah, so I think a lot of it had to do with my mom's behavior and, like, her attitude towards just darker skin. But that's also associated with, like, being Filipino, you know? And also, I think this is also, like, a very common narrative, but, like, bringing your, like, lunch to school too. Like, I remember my mom she brung, like, I think it was sinigang to school.
Oh, that's good. And then
it was, like, during my lunch break for elementary school. And then I remember, like, kids were like, what are you eating? Blah, blah, blah. Like, get that away from me. And, like, I grew up in Daly City for my childhood, so I was so confused because, like, Filipino is such a heavily populated, like, Filipino community. But, like, yeah, I got those types of comments, and I guess as a child, like, you internalize that. And as I grew older, I think it just, like, it shaped me into the person that I am today. Definitely, like, I'm glad that I went through those trials. But yeah, it definitely came a lot from my mom, and also just, like, from, like, peers, and also I think the system too, just because I remember being in my ESL classes too, like, English as a second language, because I think as my parents, when they were filling out my school paperwork, they listed Tagalog as our our main dialect back home, and I guess, like, the administration saw that as, like, I don't know, something to fix. So I was put into ESL classes, and I remember my parents were saying, or, like, my auntie was telling me that I used to be very fluent in Kapampangan when as a child.
Really?
But after going through the ESL classes, I guess, like, I lost that tongue. Which is really sad because I wish I was fluent in it.
Do you still understand?
I do understand it, but I can't speak it unless I try really hard.
But at least you understand.
Yeah, but it was also just a weird, now that I look back, it's just such a weird thing to go through, especially since my ESL teacher was Filipino herself.
Ooh.
So it was just, like, erasing my language, but also, like, that's her language too.
Yeah,
so why was the system set up like that? I don't know. When I look back at it, it's like, that's kind of weird and really sad. Yeah.
It's like replicating the erasure of the culture, and just because of that's how the system is set up. And from folks that I've even talked to, like, ESL folks or admin would tell the parents not to speak the language anymore. So it still replicates versus maybe other cultures that are able to retain it through just strong usage at home.
And it's not even, like, Filipino students being affected either. Like, if your parents list, like, Spanish as, like, your main dialect or language at home, like, you're gonna be placed in ESL regardless of whether or not, like, your English test scores were perfect. Like, I had perfect English test scores. Like, English has always been my strongest point. So it was very weird to be placed in an ESL class.
Oh, even if you had really good English scores, they put you in ESL?
Yeah, regardless. Like, if your parents list a different language other than English on your paperwork, like, you're placed in an ESL class. And it takes away from your actual education because, like, they pull you out of class to be in those classes.
I remember I was placed in it too in middle school when I first got here. And then I was looking around like, why are we doing these workbooks that are super simple? I'm like, is this right? Like, did you give me the right packet?
Yeah.
Like dog, fruit.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very, at least when I look back at it, it's very belittling too as like a child. Because then, I mean, I had like, going back to like English being my strongest point, like, was I dumb? Was I like not getting this? Like, do they not see like how hard I'm working? Like, I don't know. It was just, it's very weird looking back at that experience, and it makes me really angry, but I'm glad. I think they don't have ESL anymore, which I'm happy about.
So do you all still speak it at home, like Kapampangan?
My mom and my dad do. And all of my aunties and uncles do too, which is nice. Like, it's nice being home.
Because and like hearing the language.
Yeah,
and things like
I think that's what I miss. Because I started taking Tagalog classes. And I mean, my parents can speak Tagalog, but it's not what they speak at home. But just even being around that, and around like, I have Tita Joy. Yeah. So like just being around that type of personality is very like, it reminds me so much of home, which is why like being around it, it's comforting, you know?
I gotta say, Filipino class is one of my favorite classes in the day, because we're working on like tasks and like the lessons, but it feels like a legit family and just a hangout. And I have Ate Karen, and then it's just hella fun. They get more of my jokes too. I feel like my Filipino jokes come out, and like I can do the Tagalog jokes and everything. I'm like, yes, I'm finally at home.
Yeah, it's like talking to a relative back home. So it's always like a good time.
When you decided to go on the Kabataan, did your parents have any worries in terms of like political things like that?
Yeah, they did. It was that was their main concern. But my parents, luckily, like they've always supported me in activism. Like, I've always been the type of student or like the type of person to just like be in the front line of everything when it came to like social issues. Like, I was always volunteering, tutoring, like just trying to help like marginalized groups. So they're always supportive because they knew it was like a passion of mine, which is nice. But I know where their concern was coming from, because I mean, they were born and raised in the Philippines. Like, that's their home, so they know it better than me. But yeah, I remember my mom, like I remember the itinerary was still very like up in the air for the trip, but one of the regions we were going to visit was Mindanao. And I think there's like a lot of militarization over there.
There's still martial law.
So my mom and my dad knew about that, and once I said Mindanao, they were like, no, you can't go on this trip. And then they're also like, I'm very outspoken when it comes to like my own political views, whether it be like American or like about the American government or about the Philippine government. Like, I'm very outspoken. But something that they told me was like, keep your mouth shut when you're in the Philippines, because you don't know what's going to happen to you if you say the wrong thing to the wrong person. So that kind of shook me a little bit, just because, I mean, we have the privilege over here to an extent where we could talk about our political views and our opinions, but out there, there's a possibility of like getting kidnapped or red flagged by the government. So that kind of scared me a little bit, but I'm glad I took that advice, because even when you're going through like the immigration or like the TSA, like they ask you like, why are you here in the Philippines? You know, you can't say like, oh, I'm here for like the people's Sona. You can't be saying that. So I'm like, oh, I'm visiting family. But yeah, that was like one advice that they gave me, and I'm glad I like took it, because when I was in the Philippines, there are a lot of students who were telling me about their experience of like being red flagged because of their work in activism in the Philippines. So I think it was interesting to see that difference between here and there when it comes to like freedom of speech and like being able to fight for your rights. I think we're very privileged over here for sure.
Definitely. Like, I've definitely seen the impact of activism where you're targeted as being an activist in the Philippines. And it's almost, though, what I realize, a lot of people go into activism there more so because of the necessity. Yeah. A lot of people are really pushed because that's the only way that they really see the possibility.
Yeah.
Here we have a little bit more privilege to kind of somewhat be detached from some of the bureaucratic things that's going on in the political system. I mean, we're still affected, definitely, and especially marginalized groups are targeted, such as like undocumented folks and immigrants. But there's still a big difference in comparison, I think, to like the repercussions of activism in the Philippines.
Yeah, it was that was during my trip in the Philippines, it was my first time being exposed to like militant approach to activism. Like, it was my first time being exposed to it and like learning about it, and when I was first like learning about it or like exposed to it in the Philippines, I was like, I don't understand why. Like, why?
Could you explain what your perspective definition of militant activism, and then what kind of what you saw to be militant activism, and then continue with your reaction to it?
So for me at least, being like militant activism is using force or like having weapons on you to like fight for your rights. As opposed to like the more like protesting approach, like peaceful. So I was like exposed to that because I heard about the New People's Army in the Philippines, and that's also like a new group that I like never knew about. I've only heard about it through like my aunties and uncles saying like, oh, they're like dangerous, they're not fighting for the right thing, they're a threat to the country. That's like all I heard about. But when I came to the Philippines, and like specifically with the NutriAsia workers, where I was like really exposed to that type of, I guess, rhetoric, that's when like my initial reaction was like, I don't understand why. Like, because then over here, like when you protest, you want it to be peaceful, because I mean, violence should never be the answer, but I think in the Philippines, that's when I really knew that, like what you were saying, like it's their only means to survive, you know, like they don't want to be militant, but they have to be in order to like get their demands heard. And that's what I saw in the Philippines. Like, a lot of young students that I met were like down to be a part of the New People's Army. Like, they're willing to just like cut all ties with family and friends just to join. And I still can't comprehend that, but to an extent I can understand and like empathize with them, because if they don't go through that, then I feel like that was their very last option. So they were pushed into it in order for their conditions to be right. I remember there is this one thing that really stuck with me that a student said, but he was saying that he's willing to drop everything and like cut all ties with everyone in order to improve the Philippines, because it's not only him inheriting the future, but it's also future generations. Like, I think the younger generation in the Philippines is for sure, like, they're very agitated and very tired of everything, which is why they've become militant, because the government is unresponsive and nothing is getting better, so they resort to being militant. So I understand why, but for me, like, being in America where I don't have to really think about that, it's like, I understand you, but I don't at the same time.
It's like, you can do your best to be empathetic and to like understand their position, but like, I'm not pushed to it here, right?
Exactly.
Like, even if I'm working for like $13 an hour, I'm still able to get through like life without direct violence, unless it's like really in bad situations. But there, it's like an everyday, especially in the rural areas, like the state repression is very strong and violent in that sense. I definitely vibe with you, because I've definitely felt that feeling of like, whoa, this is a lot for me, but also kind of being cognizant of how I was raised here, and like the rhetoric of nonviolent protest has been pushed on as the kind of totem of ideal of activism and things like that.
Yeah, it reminded me of kind of like the methods that the Black Panthers used compared to like the methods of like Martin Luther King Jr. Like Martin Luther King Jr. was seen as like a peaceful protester while like Malcolm X was very intense and violent. So I like use that comparison to try and like understand and like wrap my mind around it. But to this day, like it still is really something that I'm trying to grasp because these are like folks who are like willing to risk their lives for the country, you know, in order to improve their conditions. But I think, at least for me, it should never be that, it should never get to that point, you know? And it's really disheartening to see that the Philippines and like its government is pushing people to like do that, you know?
So it's more so not a criticism of the militancy, but a criticism of the system that has pushed people to believe that this is their only path.
Yeah.
Because they have tried other methods and other ways of activism and enacting change, but have been met by corruption and violence and things like that. It's more of like the symptom to the illness.
Yeah.
Right? And then the illness being the history of oppression and the just corruption and the exploitation of the working class and masses in the Philippines.
It was a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
It was really
especially as your first like outside of family trip to the Philippines.
And it was specifically with the NutriAsia workers.
Why don't we look over some pictures and then you can tell a little background, give a little context right now of what's going on in NutriAsia. What was what's the story behind that for folks who may not know anything about NutriAsia?
So NutriAsia is basically a monopoly corporation where they dictate or like they make all of the condiments in the Philippines. So like Jufron, like the banana ketchup and everything, Datu Puti, they make all of those condiments.
Mang Tomas?
Yeah, even
Mang Tomas.
Yeah.
Why NutriAsia? I love Mang Tomas, but why you gotta be like this?
Yeah, so they're a very big monopoly, and so the workers basically were on strike to fight for better rights or like better conditions because they were only being paid 380 pesos per workday, so per 8 hours. And if they needed to work more or if they worked overtime, they weren't paid overtime.
So that's 380, that's around $7.
Yeah, if you convert it to like US dollars.
And this is in Manila.
Where we went was the mega plant in Bulacan. Yeah, I forgot what the city was called, but it was in the Bulacan area.
And so for context, so that's $7. That's a day. The minimum
not even per
wage,
hour.
Not even per hour. The minimum wage in Manila is technically 500 a day. So they're making less than that also. And you said they're working 8 hours a day.
And if they work overtime, they don't get paid overtime. And then the working conditions were also really rough. Like it was very hot in the mega plant. Also, they got, on top of like really low wages, they had deductibles from their paycheck. So like they were responsible for paying for the safety gear for when they had to work. It wasn't provided by the corporation, so they had to pay for their own gear. And also with the health benefits, they were getting health insurance, but very minimal like coverage. So they would have to go out to like a specific clinic, and like if they had like a specialized disease or illness, it wouldn't be treated. And like I also learned throughout my time in the Philippines, access to healthcare is very limited. Like it's very weather dependent too, and just like the cost of it, like what gets covered, like it's nothing to meet your basic needs to survive as a person.
It's basically, if you have money, you can get healthcare.
Yeah.
That's basically it. And it's really just more so for upper middle class people.
Yeah.
Like there's no wide healthcare plan or even things that are covered by your employer.
Yeah.
Right?
Even if it's covered by an employer, like it's barely anything.
Barely anything.
You know? Yeah.
So tell us these pictures. Let's start off.
So that's me.
That's you.
This was, I think, during one of the General Assembly meetings. This is at their physical picket line, which is no longer up because it got violently dispersed. But we were able to sit in. We were actually there for a whole week because we were stormed in because the weather was really bad, so we couldn't go to the other community. But they were nice enough to house us for that long.
So the context of Kabataan exposure trips like this is you stay with communities that you're visiting.
Yeah, so you basically do what they do on a day-to-day basis just to see what their everyday life is like. So we got to see the everyday life of the picket line of the NutriAsia strikers. So I think this is during a General Assembly meeting, which is really cool to see.
What happens?
So it was we were at an interesting point during the strike because I think workers were losing their morale because I know from the General Assembly meetings there was a lot of discussion and anger towards like workers who weren't showing up at the picket line because in order for a picket line to stay up and like be able to run efficiently, there needs to be multiple people doing multiple like different roles. So like for example, like there is one worker who specifically like is dedicated to surveillance. So like they would sit outside and like, because there's like police lined up outside of the picket line. So there's someone designated to like watch that police line to make sure like nothing escalates or nothing happens. But it was the same worker continuously, like for days on end. So he was just there and he was very angry because he's like, where's my support from the other workers? Why are we not switching roles? So I think when we were at the picket line, it was very low morale. Workers were getting tired. I mean, they were on strike since I think June something, and we were there in July. So they've been on strike for a while.
A month.
Yeah, so workers were getting tired because there was nothing being done. Their demands weren't being met. And I can understand why, but during those General Assembly meetings, they were heated. Like, it was very interesting to see.
So were they heated in terms of they wanted to stop the strike and go back to work like that, or heated still against NutriAsia?
I think a mixture of both, but mostly just no support from other workers because it was the same workers doing the same work on a day-to-day basis, receiving like no breaks or anything. So it was just the same workers putting in the work compared to like workers who were also on strike but not physically there at the picket line helping.
Do you understand Tagalog also?
I don't, so it was really difficult. I wish like I was fluent because a lot of things get lost in translation. But I was thankfully like folks from like in my group were able to translate for me during the General Assembly meetings. But something that I appreciate about the General Assembly meetings was that the members were very transparent with what they wanted and what they felt. And I don't think I've ever experienced that, especially being like involved in the PIL community. I think everyone kind of knows what the issues are, but we don't attack them directly. But with them, I saw instant change. So like once someone expressed anger about like being the only one doing surveillance, they came up with a system where they decided to switch off like every 2 or 3 hours. So once like the day before or the night before it was discussed, then the next day change was implemented like right then and there. So I thought that was really interesting to see how like change happened that fastly.
Do you hear that?
Yeah, I heard that.
Is that from outside of my residence being noisy? But so who was running the like meetings to the picket lines and things?
It was actually him.
Oh, this?
In the tank top. His name's William. I'm not sure if...
Oh, this one, the one wearing the 6?
Yeah, that's him actually. He ran the General Assembly meetings. I know there's, for the union that they have, there's a president and a vice president. I'm not sure if he had a position, but he was the one facilitating the meetings. But I think he just had the personality for it. Like, he was very stern, very transparent, and he had this very, like, not dominant presence, but he was very, like, he could easily, like, move a crowd. Which is why I think they delegated that task to him.
So these are some of the signs.
Yeah, so, like, it was raining really hard, and, like, the roof was just tarp, plastic tarp.
Oh, and that's sagging there because of the water?
Yeah, and, like, it ended up puncturing. So this is some of the workers and some of the people from my group trying to fix the roof. Because the picket line is essentially outside. Like, and they just built all of this through like labor, which was really impressive. And
then they sleep here.
They all, yeah. Well, like another thing that I got to like learn through this experience was how extreme strikes can be. I mean, I don't know, I don't have any experience with strikes here in the United States, but once you go on strike in the Philippines, or like this is at least with the case of the NutriAsia workers, there's no source of income anymore. Like you're not working when you're on strike, so you're basically not earning any money, and therefore like you can lose your home. Like a lot of folks have lost their homes because of this strike because they couldn't pay their rent. So a lot of them found a home within this picket line. So there are a lot of workers sleeping there. They get their meals from there, which is nice because different sectors of like Philippine society contributed to like the food being cooked. Like I know fisherfolk donated fish to them in order to feed all the workers there. So yeah, like a lot of workers were sleeping there because they lost their homes. Oh, and this is me just taking notes. We did a lot of talambuhais, which I really enjoy. It was crazy because it was the very first day being there, and we got to do a talambuhai with the president. And it was so...
Of the union.
Of the union, yeah.
Explain what a talambuhai is.
It's basically like a life map, or like just saying your life story. You can share as much as you want.
An eco map?
Yeah, social welfare. Yeah, something like that. And yeah, our very first talambuhai was with the president of the union. His name's Jesse. And it was a really weird experience because you think you're so different as a Filipino American, right? Like your experiences are really different from those who are Filipino and live in the Philippines. But through this talambuhai, I like realized like, nah, like we're not different. Like we're Filipino regardless of whether or not we have that hyphenated identity. So he was sharing his experiences, or like just his like his life goal was just to improve his parents' conditions, you know? Like he grew up with parents who were farm workers, so they were like the peasant class in the Philippines. And when I was like, tears were just running down my face because I really resonated with him, because he was just saying like his everyday struggle was because he wanted to have his parents' life be better and his own life be better. And I could really resonate with that because, I mean, the reason why I'm in college is because I want to like help out my parents and support them financially, and also like move up that social ladder, you know? So that talambuhai specifically got to me because it made me realize like we're not so different after all, you know? Like it seems like there's a bridge or a gap between us, but there's actually like, we're not different, you know? Like we share similar experiences even if we're living in different countries.
That must have been powerful too. And you were just also hearing the story through translation?
Yeah, it's through translation too. And it was just, yeah. It was this is the first talambuhai too that I did, so it was very powerful.
Did y'all share your talambuhais also?
Some of us did. It was harder so there's two folks, including me, who couldn't speak Tagalog as well, so it was...
How big was your group?
We were a tight-knit group, so it was only 5 of us. Yeah. So there was 3 that could speak Tagalog pretty well, like enough to get by, and then 2 of us were like, nah, like we can't speak.
And then those 3 would translate for y'all.
And so they were able to share their talambuhais, but with me, I felt kind of uncomfortable just because again, things get lost in translation, so I didn't really get to share my life story. But again, we got to know each other on like a friendly level, so.
Yeah, translating is a hard job.
It is, yeah.
Translating is weird.
It's so funny because when we were in the Aeta community, they speak Kapampangan more than Tagalog. So the tables turned on me and I had to translate.
That's dope.
It was super hard. Like I commend, or like I like praise like all the people in my group who were translating for me throughout the whole trip, because like it's just hard because then you're trying to rewire your brain. What does that mean again? So
it's like you have to become what's a good, like a bridge, definitely. But then if that bridge of like, and imagining a river flowing, like it's got two dams, but the idea is to lower the two dams so the water just flows consistently, but that's hard to do.
I also didn't want like their meaning to get lost too, because then it's like powerful hearing it in like Kapampangan, but it's like, how do I like phrase that in English to keep the meaning, you know? So it's really hard.
I remember my first year I was doing a lot of translating for the group, and it was also emotionally laborious, where I would hear stories of trauma, and then I would have to say it again, like translate it.
You actually did that for me.
Did I?
Yeah, remember for PCET?
Oh, we were in the, were you in the group when we were with the nanay on the bench?
I think it was when we were all back in that meeting room.
In the big room,
Yeah, and
about the shooting.
Yeah, there was a survivor of the war on drugs who was telling his story, and you had to translate that. And I can only imagine how emotionally taxing that can be. But it was also interesting because we got to sit like during the NutriAsia visit there. We got to sit down on like a Marxist lesson, and it was weird because they were teaching Marx lessons through like Tagalog, and I've never like experienced that before. And then one of my group members, Kenneth, he was trying to translate it for me, but he was like, I can't because I don't know the Tagalog word for capitalism. And I'm like, it's fine, like I learned about Marx back here. So but yeah, it's really interesting, like the whole like just that whole process of translating. What
was so interesting about the Marxist lesson? Like in terms of what you saw and how that experience was of just observing that?
It was really interesting because what I really appreciated with, so the reason why like the NutriAsia workers created a union was because they were getting these types of lessons by like, I think it was the Workers' Movement for Change, like that was the group that came in to actually educate the workers about their conditions and their oppression, to like make them aware. And so they came in and we got to sit in on a lesson, and I really appreciated the way they facilitated it because they were using examples that they could understand. So it was very tangible for them. So like experiences that they would go through with working with NutriAsia. And there was also like, I think if I remember clearly, there was a Coke bottle example on how profit, like to try and like explain what profit is. So I really appreciated like the type of like language being used, because like I think when it comes to like educating the masses, it could be kind of tricky because yeah, sure, you're coming in and you have that academic like vocabulary, but they don't. So how do you try and like bridge that, you know? So I really appreciated the people who did come through to teach like Marxist teachings, because they made it accessible for the workers to understand. It was just interesting because it's like, wow, like this is something that isn't just a Berkeley thing. Like there are folks in the Philippines also like using it. So it was just interesting to see that. And also just, yeah, again, going back to the whole making it accessible, I think that's also another method that I want to use if I do go into like more community organizing. Because I think that's a really big issue here.
What is?
At least like when you're educating people who don't have like a higher education background, like it could be very hard for them to really understand those like complex theories or terms. So trying to meet them eye to eye is like the best approach.
Like meet folks where they're at, and then
instead of like belittling them, you know,
and like lecturing.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel it. Like even if you go to the direct text, I mean, we were in the same sociology class last year too, and then some of those old writings are just so dense. Like you're like, what is the use of this?
Even like I can't understand it. So
and then I do think what I got from you is they have the lived experience that actually exemplifies the theory.
Exactly.
Right? Of like the who owns the actual means of production. Right? They're right there. They're actually producing, and then they get to see that they don't benefit while the owners drive away in their nice cars and everything. Though this is what it is, like one of those big events recently because they were violently dispersed, you said?
Yeah, they were. I mean, we were still in the Philippines when that happened. We were just finishing our visit with the Aeta community, and we received news that it was violently dispersed. And it was just really weird. Like, I remember getting the news and just, like, instantly, like, just bawling. And it was, like, those aren't workers anymore. Those are my friends being hurt, you know? Those are their families being hurt. And it made me really angry because it was during a mass when they were violently dispersed. And I remember, I didn't read any of the media just because I know it was going to be, you know, like, shaped into something that makes the workers look bad. So, but then I did hear from, like, what people were reading online that, like, to justify because, like, folks got arrested during the dispersal. To justify those arrests, the police were saying, oh, they had weapons on them, blah, blah, blah. So it's just very frustrating when you see, like, the media perpetuating these types of things, because it's like, these workers are just, they're already struggling to begin with. Like, they're just trying to, you know, live life and, like, try and, like, you know, improve not only, like, their conditions, but, like, the conditions of their family, you know. And it was just angering because it's like, why does the media portray you like this, you know, when you're just trying to survive? So yeah, it, like, the violent dispersal, like, happened, and so their picket line is no longer up. But I think the fight is still going on. It was nice to see because, like, when I came back to the States from the Philippines, I saw how much coverage it was getting, not only in the Philippines, but it gained attention over here. Like, I know folks were striking at, like, seafood cities and, like, telling people, or, like, boycotting NutriAsia, like, not buying any of the products. So that was nice to see, because that's all the workers wanted. Whenever we would ask the workers what they wanted, they would be like, we just want folks, especially in the United States, to understand, like, what's going on here and, like, what we're going through. And we just want folks to stop buying these products because the products have, like, blood, sweat, and tears essentially in the products, you know, so.
Shout out to your mama for cooking that good spaghetti without NutriAsia.
Yeah, I
products.
was really surprised that, because, like, she's very, like, to her ways, like, she's very traditional when it comes to recipes. So I was really surprised when I told her, like, nah, no NutriAsia products. She really supported it because I think to an extent when I, like, talk about my experiences in the Philippines, she's finally understanding why I care so much.
How has that communication been in terms of sharing?
I remember, like, with my parents,
with your mom, with your family, yeah,
okay.
Coming back to your family, and sharing those things.
With my, I think.
Wait. Can we before that? Can we go through some of these pictures first?
Oh, yeah.
Give me some thoughts and everything before we move on.
Those are some of the students from Bulacan State, which they were there just to support, which is also nice to see. So they were really involved. This is the Talambuhay that got to me. That's the president of the union in the blue shirt. So this is just a Talambuhay, and everyone was just listening in. Because it was funny because folks were saying, or, like, at least the workers were saying that he usually doesn't open up. So they were surprised that he was opening up to us. So they were saying that he's usually very, like, stern.
And doesn't share that much and stuff.
Very serious. And this was actually not when we were there. This is a picture that they sent us. They're really cute because they keep in communication with us through Facebook. So this is a picture of them. I think this was at the United People's Sona, so I was there for that. And then more pictures. This was the cultural night that we had, just to close off the whole visit. And that was nice because we, instead of just, like, heavy topics being discussed, like, we actually got to, you know, uplift some of the workers' spirits and just sing and dance together.
That's a consistent thing in a lot of the organizing spaces.
That's what I recognize too,
nights,
yeah. And I think it really does help because it's more like celebrating, because then I think when you're going through that struggle, it's so easy just to have low morale and just be upset about everything, you know. But I think community, or, like, at least cultural nights like that, really uplift you and, like, remind you, like, why you're in the struggle together, you know.
I think it also hits another part of the spirit. Also, like, music, creativity, like, performance.
There's I was introduced to a lot of revolutionary songs during my trip here, and I was like, wow, like, I didn't know this was a thing. So it was really cool to hear. And it was all in Tagalog too.
Yeah. I need to learn actually some, like, there's a lot of like songs that tell stories about people's movement and fighting for rights and things like that. And it's a totally different shift from even honestly some of the music that I make, right? Like it makes me really think about what is the power and the impact that music can have. And all.
But yeah, like that's usually it's really cool because they built that table themselves. And it like during the day it's like used as like, you know, a table where you can play checkers or cards or like to eat dinner, but at night it's converted into a bed.
Looks like it. I was just about to say. It is good to have like are you performing something?
Oh yeah, I had to write a speech that would because like again, like I said, when we visited them, the workers were very just like tired. They had low morale. They didn't see a point in the strike anymore. So I think her name was Rochelle. Yeah, Rochelle.
She was one of the one speaking.
She was one of the Bulacan State students, and she encouraged me to write one to uplift their spirits.
Do you have that?
I actually do, I think.
Would you like to read it?
Hopefully my notebook is here. I don't think... Because I kept it in here.
Is it? Hopefully.
It's not, but I could share it with you.
You still have it?
I do. I have that journal with me. I don't know why I didn't bring it, but it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, but I also have a video. I could share that with you too, but essentially I was talking in English, but she was translating to Tagalog, so there's that again.
What did you write? What did you share and stuff?
I just pretty much like what I've been telling you. Like I've really learned how different community organizing is in the Philippines. Like it's much so like it's very. I feel like with community organizing in the Philippines, change happens really fast. Or at least like it's a very united struggle, as opposed to in the United States. I don't have a lot of experience, but what I've seen, it's very like, or at least like from the experience that I've heard from like Kenneth, who like has a lot of experience with community organizing here. He was saying like he appreciates the transparency and like the agitation and like the quickness in like change that he sees within like community organizing in the Philippines. Like it's very different in that sense. So I was just talking about like what I saw and like how much they're sacrificing because I mean they're not working, they're away from their families and their kids, so I was just trying to kind of recenter them and try and reground them in like why they're striking in the first place, because I think it's very easy to like lose a sense of purpose when you're going through like a protest or a strike.
I think the good way to represent the sacrifices that community organizers have is that I met this one community organizer who he goes into the community and then he stays there and he helps mobilize through educational discussions or whatever is needed by the larger org that is there. And this dude was telling me he didn't see his brother for like 3 years, right? So it's that amount of sacrifice in the sense of like, it's not just you're going to community organization meetings like here, like on a weekly or whatever, but some of them are like living their lives there in the community, not going home and giving their like 24 hours just organizing.
Yeah, I mean, like with sacrifices, like sacrifices are sacrifices no matter how big or small, but like comparing the sacrifices being made between like community organizers here in the Philippines, theirs is very intense. I think there was a worker that I met and she didn't see her sister for like 2 years either because she was striking, or like she was like working. I was a NutriAsia worker and now she's striking. So it's also like to protect the safety of your family too. Like I know the president of the union, he had to relocate his family away from their original home to ensure their safety because he has received threats. So by the management and by the government. So there's a lot of sacrifice, like intense sacrifices being made.
What are your plans in terms of like, you said you're thinking of going into community organizing? Like what's that pull and like into what direction?
I think I'm still kind of like trying to figure out what I want to do with my life personally. But I think after going to the Philippines, I definitely see myself going back continuously. Like I'm trying to go this summer again. Trying to make it I definitely didn't want to leave this trip, or like I definitely didn't want this trip to end at this trip. Like usually, like I remember I went to Nicaragua when I was in high school for 3 weeks, and once that trip was over, that trip was over. But I think I really want to change that, because it's so easy just to be like, I think we have the privilege of like, you know, immersing ourselves in these communities and just leaving. And that's something that I don't want to do anymore, or like at least I want to change. Because like, yeah, we have the privilege of like being exposed to what they're going through, because that's not our lives, like that's not our everyday struggle, and we have the privilege of going back here and like, you know, living comfortably. But yeah, I definitely want to take what I've learned from this trip beyond the actual trip, and really take what I've learned and share. Like the expo panel that we did recently, that was something that I want to do more, and even just this podcast sitting with you, just letting these narratives be told. But for me, again, dialogue is a good thing, but it's also like, what are you going to do with that dialogue? Like I want to take it beyond that. So continuously visiting the Philippines, and like, I think for me at least, I really want to keep these relationships I have established through this expo trip strong. So like revisiting the Aeta communities, like keeping in touch with the NutriAsia workers. I think that's something that I want to do. And I see myself, like this is the plan that I have, but I definitely I see myself living in the Philippines for a year or two to do community organizing work, because I don't know, I feel like being back here, there's only so much that you can do. I think that being there physically in the Philippines is where most of the work can be done. Like actually having those face-to-face interactions, and like building together is the most efficient way, but like it's not as accessible as like doing work here. You could do a lot of advocacy work here, which is important, but for me, I like being in the front line. So I see myself visiting the Philippines hopefully yearly, and then hopefully like after graduating, if like finances and like, you know, time permits, like I want to be able to live out there for a little bit and continue to build and like be a part of the struggle.
So in 2 years we'll see you there.
That's the hope, that's the plan. Yeah.
Hey, they always are open to like support and everything.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel very strongly about it. And I think I mentioned this to a lot of folks whenever I talk about my experience, but even though like we're always on the move in the Philippines, I always felt very settled and centered doing the work in the Philippines. So it's definitely something that I've learned to be, or like it's something that I realize that I'm passionate about.
What do you mean? Expound on that a little bit of being centered when you're doing the work.
So I don't know, like with me, I've always had different interests. Like they're always all over the place too. But when I was out there in the Philippines, the work felt familiar. And it was weird because it was like, I've never done this before. But it felt familiar, and I also felt the most like myself being out there, and also just conversing. Like, I mean, I was talking to strangers in English and they didn't understand me, but I felt the most, I felt the most comfortable and like the most happy. So I think that says a lot. I just listened to my feelings out there, and I think I felt very in tune with them, as opposed to here where it's like, oh, am I doing the right thing? Like, I don't know if I should be doing this, but out there I was like, yes, this is work that I see myself doing. Like it's a very like, I'm 100% into this, you know, as opposed to here where it's like, I'm kind of iffy, you know, if that makes sense.
I definitely can relate. Like, I feel that I'm more authentically myself when I am in the Philippines.
Yeah.
I'm not
and
sure why.
And it's weird.
Yeah.
I can't explain it.
And I wouldn't say like I'm faking it here. It's just like, I just feel freer, and especially when I am with communities.
Yeah, exactly.
Rather than like the Manila, because I can get pretty insulated in Manila also, right? Being upper middle class there, like you can have a car, go like eat nice places. But then just when I get to do community works, visit, and tasks there in the Philippines, like my spirit feels better.
Yeah.
Like, and I have more energy and a drive and a vision.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I felt like in the Philippines, which is what I mean by feeling like very settled and centered. Because it's like, I know this is work that needs to be done and this is work that I want to do. Not because like I'm getting like influenced by other people, but this is just because this is something that I'm really, this is like a fight that I see is necessary and I want to be a part of it, you know? Because I think growing up too, like I've based a lot of my decisions off of like what my parents think or what like my friends think. So, but for the very first time, like with community organizing, specifically in the Philippines, like this is a decision that I made on my own, like on my own terms.
Was there a moment that was especially significant for you during this trip that maybe flipped a switch or that stuck with you in terms of the direction for you, like being a community organizer and moving towards that direction?
I think it was just throughout the whole trip. I don't think there was like a significant singular like event that happened, but I think it was just like being around like the communities and like the people and just seeing like what community can truly be. And also like what I really appreciated was that a lot of the reasons why communities end up becoming like organized or unionized is because there are like folks who do come from like a higher education background. Like they come in and they educate these folks. And that's something that like I really appreciated seeing, because I mean I like think about like I think back to like my political theory class where it's like, is it oppression if they don't know they're being oppressed? And because then it's like,
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So that question really stuck with me, and I'm glad that I was like able to hear that before going to the Philippines, because I mean, I think what I really appreciated about like these folks coming in and educating the masses is that without them, they would have never acknowledged that they're being oppressed. Does that make sense? So like throughout this trip, I've been seeing like the impact of like education, like just holding that knowledge. Like, yes, it can be burdensome. Like, damn, like I didn't know this was going on. Like, I didn't know that these systems were oppressing me, but it's liberating at the same time. And so it was also liberating for me too, like even with my own experiences of like learning Philippine history and like unlearning a lot of the things that I learned through like high school and stuff like that. Like, sure, the knowledge is burdensome, but it's very liberating. And I think that's specifically what I want to do. Like, that's my focus when it comes to community organizing. Like, when it comes to like, you know, educational discussions, I want to be able to facilitate that. So like, I really appreciated that, because it was a common theme that I saw within the communities. Like, they didn't start working towards like demanding, they didn't become like agitated until like people came in and told them to like, or like made them acknowledge like, yes, this is happening, you should like, it's affecting your livelihood, you know. So I think that's like my main focus when it comes to community organizing, and that's like the type of direction that I want to take with it. But yeah, there's no specific like event that happened.
So there's like a strong respect and almost, I don't know, like newfound kind of appreciation for those folks who have educational privilege, going back to communities and using that educational exposure and experience to let people know about or be aware of the oppression that's going on. Yeah,
because you could easily take your degree and like do something like become an engineer, earn all that money, and then like, you know, go on your own way and be comfortable. But I think for me, something that I really want to do is like, yes, I recognize my privilege of being able to like get an education, especially like at Berkeley, you know. So I want to be able to share that knowledge and that education, you know, because I feel like, at least for me, when I earn a degree, it's not only my degree, but like my family's degree and like, you know, the Philippines, you know, like the people in the Philippines. And just like, I feel like education is very powerful because it enables you to do a lot of things that you feel like you could have never done. So I want to be able to share those privileges with other people who might not have the opportunity to do so, you know.
So next year we'll be seeing you go back.
Hopefully, yeah. The study abroad program got approved. So.
Yeah. I'm thinking of applying to that one.
Yeah, and I appreciate the way Tita Joy was, or like I know she was working on it, but like I appreciate like the whole, like everyone who put in like that effort to like make this program exist. Like I appreciate the fact that they structured it in a way where it's more like an expo trip, you know? Because I think a lot of folks, especially here, like I really want them to go on an exposure trip because it is life-changing and it opens your eyes to like different perspectives, and like it's very easy to be comfortable with your own perspectives and like your own experiences, but like actually going out there and like being exposed to everything I think is really important.
I think it's even important for people in the Philippines to go on exposure trips in the Philippines, especially if you come from like upper middle class communities, and like it's a big shift. Like my perspective has totally shifted, and because even in the Philippines I was able to just live a good life, like in terms of my dad's a condo, has a car, things like that, not exposed to like working class families and or farming fisher folks and things like that.
It's interesting that you bring up family in the Philippines because like I got to stay with family before my trip started because I just caught an earlier flight, and I just stayed with them because I haven't seen them since I was like 4 or 5. So I have like 2 relatives from my mom's side that still live in the Philippines. So my oldest cousin still lives out there, and he lives in Bagang, which is like where all my family is from. And then my mom has a nephew that lives in like the Bulacan area, and he owns a gas station. So it was very weird to see like the difference in wealth within your own family, because like my cousin still lives in like the provinces, you know, like he still lives in like that metal house shack that my family grew up in. But then comparing it to my mom's nephew, where he owns a gas station, has a condo, has 2 cars, like why is there that difference still, especially within family, you know? It's just really, it was just weird to see. I can't really describe how, like, it's very jarring, you know?
It's like those contradictions that a lot of people in the organizing spaces like talk about, how you manage those contradictions or you face them, and then realizing like, yo, I've benefited from privilege in a lot of ways, especially economic privilege, even if like I always share, I'm brown and I'm an immigrant here in the US, but I'm upper middle class when I'm in the Philippines, right? And even just the ability to get an education, right? Just to come to Berkeley, while folks be stopping going to school because they can't afford the 4,000 peso, $100 for the semester or something like that.
I think like if folks do go on expo trips, they're confronted with their privilege, and it could be really scary and like, whoa, like I wouldn't consider myself privileged, but like in the Philippines you are, and I think instead of like being scared of it and also like trying to like deny it, like you should just embrace it and use those privileges to try and like uplift folks who are like not as privileged as you know. So I think it's really important to confront that, to recognize your place, you know.
I think it's definitely jarring.
It is.
It's definitely jarring, and it could also bring up like a defense mechanism. Like, no, not by, right? Versus like, oh shoot, I am. And I think you bring up like the good perspective to have of like, all right, then how can I use the privilege to like confront these things, right? And I had a mentor actually tell me though, like, and it's very important to have like truth tellers in your life, right? And I had a mentor just tell me like, you know, Christian, I noticed that you're in a point where you don't want to give up your privileges. And it really made me think, I'm like, damn, I never really thought of the privileges that I have and the thought of giving it up, right? And how to give it up, how to use it to serve those who don't have those, right? Because we're like consistently trained to like climb the ladder for our own or our families kind of benefit, right? So get that job so that the house can be secure, things like that. And it's so on some level it's necessary. Like I want to help sustain my lola and her health care, things like that. At the same point, we are still participating in the system that exploits a lot of people who are not as privileged as like ourselves, right?
I think there was also discussion that we ended up having about like what does a degree even earn you, and I thought that was really like weird too, because then I grew up with that type of like my parents were always like, you need to get an education, blah blah blah. But when I went to the Philippines, it's like, are you contributing to that system that is continuously like perpetuating like oppression and like corruption? And it's like, I never really thought about it that way. So like you're just confronted with a lot of like very weird not weird but interesting contradictions, and it's like kind of hard to like, you're kind of like in a limbo where it's like, which side do I go with, or like what really lines up with my morals and like my values, you know? So I think like when you do go on expo trips, you're confronted with those contradictions, and it's just really hard to navigate, I think, if you don't talk it through with someone.
What was before we go to Pisapungan, is that the next one? Which one? Pisapungan, Sona, or Taliptip?
Taliptip was
Taliptip,
next,
okay.
yeah.
Before we go to that one, were there any contradictions that you feel came up with you? What was like a struggle in that sense during the trip?
I think it was like going back, the whole privilege thing too. I think I felt that a lot being out there, but I think it wasn't like a really hard contradiction though, because then I like just embraced it. Because then, I mean, I recognize my privilege here in the United States too. Like, even though, like, I'm low income first gen, like, a woman of color, like, I'm still privileged in a sense where I have a roof over my head, you know? I have parents that love me, like, family that supports me, you know? Like, I could eat 3 meals a day if I, like, wanted to, you know? So, I'm privileged in that sense. So, it wasn't really hard to confront out there, but it still was very, like, weird to navigate and just be confronted by it, because you're actually like witnessing it firsthand, and I think that's what made it different, you know? Because then these are just thoughts that I have here in the United States, but when I was in the Philippines, it's like right in front of my face, you know?
I remember being very conscious of my thoughts and realizing like, even if I don't verbally complain, like I have complaining thoughts in my head.
Yeah.
Where like I'm like, damn, am I really high maintenance like that?
Like I think something that made me really, really check my privilege was the bathroom situations in the Philippines. Like
or the no bathroom situations in the
I remember when we were hiking up to the Aeta community, like it was almost a day hike, and you know there's no bathrooms out there in the wilderness, so like if you had to pee or poop, like you had to like drop one like on the side of the trail. Like, there was no trail, so yeah, I think just being confronted with that, like damn, like even just like the little necessities, I don't even think of it as a necessity anymore, like just the little like, you know, conveniences that you have here, like you won't have out there in the Philippines, and it really makes you like recognize that, or like makes you aware of like the types of things that you have here. Like a toilet to me is no longer like a necessity, like it's definitely like a luxury to have, because then you have folks in the Philippines who have holes as toilets, you know? So you just make do with what you have and just be happy with it, you know, and be thankful that it's not like the worst, you know? As long as you can poop or pee, like just be thankful for that.
Shout out though to baby wipes. Baby wipes is a necessity too. Like some folks can't even afford it out there, so you have to wipe with what? Leaf.
Yeah. So you really do. I think there's like a category of like wants and needs, and definitely it like a lot of the things under my needs list has shifted over wants. So yeah.
It made you like realize like you don't really need this.
Yeah, exactly.
Make you even check your own kind of desires.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also really scary to confront, I think. But I mean, it's necessary, you know, because you're placed in the shoes of like folks who actually live through that on a day-to-day basis. So it makes you more empathetic towards their situation. So
tell us a little bit about what's Taliptip.
Yeah, so this was also in the Bulacan area, and what's happening here is that a lot of this area specifically is heavily populated with fisherfolk, but they're currently facing displacement because San Miguel is planning on building an aerotropolis, which is like an airport and city type of like plan that they have. And so San Miguel is basically another.
These are really good pictures.
Yeah, they're from the film camera. So yeah, San Miguel, as y'all know or like don't know, they are another monopoly, like a very big corporation, and like they're a really popular beer company out there.
San Miguel beer.
Yeah, and then
they also own Red Horse.
Yeah, but it's weird because I learned that they also own the means of electricity and water out there, so they're a really big corporation.
They've diversified to do a lot.
But yeah, they're planning on building an aerotropolis out there, and so fisherfolk are being pushed out of their homes, and these fisherfolk have and their families have been here for generations, generation after generation. So, and fish, if you're a fisherfolk, your livelihood is dependent on fishing. So when these folks do get displaced, they don't have another job to go to because all they've known is fishing. And that's how they earn money. And even I learned that fisherfolk are one of the most poorest in the Philippines. So even then, you're already trying to push out these people who have nothing to begin with. So and so San Miguel, the plan is in the process of being approved, but the thing is, the corporation has already started bringing people in to measure how deep the water is. They've been talking to community members and trying to feel out the land, and they're also already cutting the mangroves in the rivers, and those mangroves serve as homes for the fish and also are natural flood barriers. So it's just an environmental issue too. The plan hasn't been approved, but yet they're still starting the process of building it or building the aerotropolis. And there are promises of finding a relocation site for fisherfolk, but it's just up in the air. It's just being said. There's no specific location or building that they can go to. So it's just word of mouth. And we
don't even know if the relocation sites will be good for fisherfolk.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Because then their livelihood is dependent on fishing. Are they being relocated near a river as well, so they can continue fishing and continue earning for their family? So that's what they're currently facing. This was a community that was kind of difficult to grasp, just because with NutriAsia there were tangible things that we can do when we go back to the United States to help them out. But with Taliptip, me and my group just didn't know what to do because San Miguel is a large corporation, and a lot of the fisherfolk were already really old. And so we were asking them, what do you want us to do? We're here to help y'all. And a lot of them didn't know what they wanted. So we were trying to encourage them to organize and try and fight against San Miguel. But a lot of the older generation was just they have money, we don't. How can we fight against them? So I think this community in particular has shown me money does play a role. And it's just really disheartening to see and hear, just because you want to help but you don't know how. But then it goes back to just raising awareness of their situation. I know there's a campaign going on. It's #SaveTaliptip. They have a Facebook group page and everything. But I think it's really hard to say this, just because I also don't want to believe it, but I think this community is definitely going to be displaced.
In issues like this, because I've seen areas that are going through like what developers would say redevelopment, right?
Yeah.
Which basically is displacement
Yeah.
and pushing folks out under the guise of like, hey, this is for economic development and things like that. And the struggle with it is that it's being done through quote unquote legal means, right? Of whether it's zoning redevelopment plans, which the government will say, hey, we're allowed to do this because this ordered that and that, or people are buying land and then consolidating land and then using it like that. But at the end of the day, these people have no choice.
Yeah,
right?
exactly, which was kind of hard for me to come to terms with, because like at least for me it's like fight for what you believe in until like you can't anymore, but for them there isn't even a fight that they can do or like they can go through, you know, like they can't even fight against this. So it's really hard to come to terms with that. But also like going back to like the whole process of like redevelopment, I thought it was really interesting because I think there, at least from what I was hearing from community members, there was a lot of like work and like collaboration being done between the barangay, which is like just the government of like the small provinces, and like San Miguel. I think like the barangay captain or like the leader, he actually sold the land to the corporation without telling any of the fisherfolk what he was doing. And so even like your own people that you expect to like lead you in the right direction, like they don't even do that for you. So there's a lot of corruption even on like a local government level.
We saw that where one time in Visayas after the Typhoon Yolanda hit, like the people whose homes were damaged were allotted a certain amount of money for rebuilding, and that was allowed on paper. And then once you go interview folks who were supposed to receive money, you hear stories of how it was only the barangay captain's friends and like his people who got him in, who were able to get like the funds for development.
So it's like just violence against community members. Like it's, community is strong, but it can also be turned against you, you know? And I think that's what I saw within Tilip-Tip.
And what's kind of sad is that, or what you can sometimes see is that even those people who are barangay captains, they're not rich.
They're not.
A lot of can be just working class, just like a little step maybe above where they might have a nicer TV or a concrete home versus like the straw house or that they just set up. But it's really benefiting still the large corporations who are leaps and bounds above these communities and who benefit off the space, the land, the resources there. And sometimes like even honestly, like the reason why I also invite folks to share and I like talking about these things, because even me, when I think about everything at play and the power of these institutions, the corporations, I even feel a little like, I don't want to say hopeless because I still have hope, but like such a daunting task that you are pushing up against something so big and established, right?
That's how I felt like when I went to visit Tilip-Tip, because for lack of better words, I felt hopeless, you know, because it's like even the community members don't know what they want. I don't know what they need, and I want to make sure that, you know, we're giving them something that they also want, you know? So it's like there is nothing compared to like my visit with NutriAsia. Like there was no tangible goal for Tilip-Tip. And I think that was really hard to come to terms with, you know? Because it's like we're just visiting and like learning their struggle, but how can we help them through their struggle? We couldn't think of anything.
So like two completely ends of the spectrum, like where one had a tangible call of action and this is what we need, versus Tilip-Tip, like
you just feel hopeless. It's
just a struggle that you see. right? The issues there, but there wasn't any concrete kind of plan to address it.
No.
How did that feel coming out of it?
It felt weird. I can't find the right words to describe it. It just felt like, kind of like, wow, like, sure, I have all of this, like, I've learned, like, I did tell them buhais here too, like, I mean, it was just weird because then I'm leaving a community that I can't even help. But yet I know what's going on there. But then it goes back to, like, just raising awareness and, like, advocating for them. And, like, also just, like, you know, keeping up to date with, like, hashtag save Tilip-tip, you know, just doing those little things I think can be enough, but at least for me, it never always feels like enough. So
I was reading this thing. It was like one of the last articles in our GPP class, and it was talking about how, I'm paraphrasing, but the idea that the worst thing to do is silence, right? And like that's going to kill your soul. Right? Even because it was analyzing this poem, and this poem was talking about, wow, it's almost we can't do anything about it. Like, and it was going into this meta kind of analysis. Like, no, the mere act of saying that it's hopeless is almost something. It's still something because it's pointing out the hopelessness that is felt in this situation because of the extremity of the issue, right? And I do believe that the goal is real tangible action, though I still also believe in the merit of not being silent on issues.
It was also interesting too, though, because the I forgot her name, but we had a person, kind of like a tour guide. She visits this community often, so she was showing us around and like introducing the community members to us, and she was saying that like what Tilip-tip needs and like the communities there, what they need is professionals coming in, so like engineers and all of that to like because they deal a lot with flooding. Like we were also there during like really bad weather, so like the tides were really high. So she was saying like, yeah, we need like professionals to come in, even doctors, because like with people who end up getting sick in these areas, it's very weather dependent. So like if you need to get to like a clinic or like a hospital, it's very dependent on the weather. So even like the trip, it takes you like 30 minutes to get to like the nearest clinic or hospital. But if weather permits, like sometimes you can't even go to the hospital because the tides are just so like rough. So she was kind of saying like, we need professionals to come through to like help out these communities and like actually utilize what they've like, you know, what they know and what they can do to help communities like Tilip-tip. So it was interesting to see that type of like method of help, because like at least for me, like when I think of engineers and like doctors, like I'm like, they can't really do a lot of activism because they have their own jobs to deal with. But again, they can come into these communities and like use their skills and help them out, you know. So I thought that was like a very interesting method that I like got to learn through our tour guide. So is this flooding in people's homes right now? Like, yeah, I think with this home, the family just ended up leaving because it was like just super flooded. Because the tides are really high. The Philippines is a rainy season over the summer, so yeah. It actually got, like, the weather was pretty dangerous because we were on a boat, and then there was, like, in the middle of our boat ride, we had to stop at, like, the middle of the community, so, because then the tides were just too rough. So just even imagining, like, folks who need to go into the inner city to get, like, food, like, they can't even do that because
what do you mean middle of the community?
There's, like, the way it was set up, it was, like, so, like, there was, like, a community, like, on one end, and then another community on the other end, and there's, like, a community right here. I don't know if that makes sense. I forgot the names of the communities, but, like, we just, like, did a detour.
And then that's all around one big lake or something?
It was a river. It looked like an ocean, but they told me that it was a river.
Oh.
So there's, like, different communities situated in different areas of the river.
Oh, interesting. And this is while y'all are on the boat.
Yeah.
going from community to community?
There were like certain communities that we were going to visit, but like where we ended up stopping was in a community that we planned on visiting. So yeah, that's how bad it was.
This is the flooding.
This is on our way to to the to Tip.
Damn.
Yeah, because we came from NutriAsia to Tip, and this was like the road trip there, basically. Yeah.
Damn, bro.
The weather was really bad.
Good thing, I mean, those motorcycles are still running, but
yeah,
damn.
I also learned too that there's no sort of like sewage at all in the Philippines, so this is why neighborhoods get like this. This is why they flood. So that's just another issue.
Like infrastructure. That's what made me think too, like in terms of privilege, there's like infrastructure privilege like that, where like, yo, we have roads out here and sewage systems, things like that, which separates us from like diseases, things like this, or even just the daily discomfort of.
And it's interesting because before going to the Philippines, I came across a post about like romanticizing like the struggle, and it went back to like flooding. Like you often see in the media like happy children dancing in the rain or like swimming in the floods, but you never really like. It's kind of like the pictures are usually captioned like, you know, happy Filipino kid, like in the flood, you know, like in light of everything, in light of all the storms going on, you know, the Filipinos are still persistent and resilient, you know, but then it doesn't really address the fact that there's no sort of like sewage control or like infrastructure. Like, sure, you're romanticizing the idea, and yeah, sure, Filipinos are resilient, but what are you doing about it, you know? There's nothing being done. Like, they don't have to be happy in the flood. They could be happy with like, you know, sewage infrastructure.
Yeah.
So there's also that idea, that narrative of like romanticizing the struggle.
I get that point. I think I saw someone post about that. Maybe it was the same
I think
one.
it was probably the same post.
Yeah, of like, because you always see the post of the Filipino spirit, so cordial, so like in the light of any issue, things like that,
still happy. A smile on their face.
It's like, but bro, give us city planning.
Exactly,
like that, right? Like,
yeah, like sure, we're happy, but we could be happy with better conditions too, you know? Yeah, so that's just another narrative.
Because it's almost like an erasure of the issues that are going on, or even the inadequacies of those in power.
Yeah, it's kind of just like brushing the issues aside and not paying attention to like what's actually happening.
How long did y'all stay here in Tip?
It was, I think, 3 days only, so a very short visit.
What's this Concordia? Oh,
I'm not
that's
sure what
a different. That's a document. Sona or Pisapungan?
I think Sona was next.
Sona. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, there's no pictures. What was Sona like for you? There's no pictures in this.
Oh, there's no pictures? Oh, that's my bad. Sona it was the United People's Sona. It was, at first I was kind of scared just because I've never been to a rally that big.
So context, State of the Nation address is given.
So Duterte, the president of the Philippines, has his own Sona, which is kind of like the State of the Union address here, given by like the president here. But the Philippines has that State of the Nation's address. And so this is where like he talks about his plans, his goals for the rest of his term, and then to take the converse of that, to fight against like his beliefs and what he wants for the country, different sectors of Philippine society came together to have a United People Sona, which is like a rally against Duterte and what he's been doing, to hold him accountable in a sense. And so we ended up going after the Tip trip, because then the first half of my Kabataan Alliance trip was with the International Solidarity Mission trip, so ISM, and so we were with them for the first half, and the end of the trip was Sona, or the United People Sona. So I was just kind of anxious because, again, I've never been in a rally that big, and also just going back to the whole like idea of, you know, protesting and like speaking up against the government. That's dangerous in the Philippines. So it was just a different environment that I was in, and so I was very anxious. But when I was there and like marching with folks, it was very empowering because you never really, or at least for me, I never really knew about like activism in the Philippines, like with the People's Power movement. I don't know the history of it, and I never really thought that like the Philippines can come together like this in order to like, you know, show Duterte what he's doing is wrong, you know, or considered wrong. So it was very eye-opening to see that, and also like it made me really hopeful that yes, Duterte is doing a lot of horrible things and like going against a lot of human rights, but there's also a lot of folks in the Philippines who are going through that struggle to reclaim the Philippines in a sense. So Sona was a very interesting experience. Also, I think it also goes back to like creativity and like activism. I saw a lot of really good propaganda.
Yeah, no, they're dope. They're great at like the effigies. I think that's what they're called. The
also,
effigies.
like I saw like the urban poor marching. Even like folks who don't have anything, they'll make something out of what they have, and I thought that was really interesting to see too, and very empowering too. And Sona was a very hopeful event for me.
I actually went to Sona with SICAD, which is Sining Kadamay, and then they do like a bunch of cultural things. So like during the whole time they had drumming. It was so
I think I saw that. It was drumming with like garbage cans, right? Or
garbage cans, and also they used tires. They
I saw
taped
that.
tires around and made drums, and it was hella loud. Like just the ingenuity of that, like, whoa, I would not have thought about that. And then they had like visual artists where they created stencils, big stencils to spray paint like artwork and everything. And I was with a group that did like street theater. So they taught like kids a routine of and like a storyline based on like the killings and the political issues going on, and then they performed it right there on the street, like. And it was all at the rally. It was beautiful to see like the involvement of folks from different sectors.
It was nice to see them come together too, because sure they have different types of struggles, different types of like things that they're going through, but at the end of the day, it's all like a violation to human rights. So it's basically like, you know, it was just nice to see them all come together, because I've never seen something like that, especially here in the States. Like I don't think that I've ever been to a rally that big.
Did you go to rallies a lot here in the U.S.? Like,
I think
how were you in terms of your activism and all?
When Trump was elected was when I like started going to protest. But what I've noticed about protest here is that there are some folks in the crowd who are just there to be in the crowd, like they don't have a purpose. And with Sona, at least, this is just my experience with protest here. With Sona, like everyone was there for a reason. And like with at least with the protests that I've been because of like Trump's election, yes, there were people who were passionate, and angry about the issue, but there are also a lot of folks who were just there to be there, like kind of
like an event to go to.
Kind of like a speculation in a sense, like
Here, I just converted the pictures to 347, so we can look at.
Oh, is this the?
These are the ones. Are they? I don't think this is Sona. Is this Aeta? I think this is Aeta.
Yeah, this is the Aeta community.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't think.
You don't have photos from
we don't have
Sona.
a lot of photos from Sona. It was also just like a safety precaution too, or a protocol.
Yeah. Okay, so next we have Pisapungan. Tell us a little bit about this while I scroll through pictures.
So this was the community that I was most excited about, just because I've never really learned about indigenous folks, especially in the Philippines. So to get to the community, we had to hike. It was just a day hike, and it took us 8 to 9 hours to get to the community. And so we were going through different types of terrain. Like this was like sand. This was kind of sandy, And then we went through like 7 rivers to get to like the community. So it was one of the hardest hikes of my life, but it was definitely worth it. Because I think this is a community that I really enjoyed specifically, especially since like they spoke Kapampangan. It was just very like familiar. But what they're going through is there's a lot of like militarization going on, especially in like indigenous communities. This was in Tarlac, yeah, and so yeah, the hike was really hard. But yeah, they're facing militarization within the area. So at least when I was talking to the community members, they were talking about harassment from like some of the folks who are in the military, like soldiers. So like
Ate Mayet went with you.
Yeah, she was our tour guide, our quote-unquote tour guide. And so yeah, that sunset was really nice. That was like in the middle of our hike. But yeah, so a lot of folks were telling us stories of harassment from the soldiers. There are American soldiers and Filipino soldiers occupying the space. But yeah, there are soldiers who, there were stories where their livestock was being like stolen by them, and like they would find dead chickens and dead pigs. And of course, who else would kill them? Like they were assuming it was the soldiers because they're the only other people like in the space, you know? And then another thing, I think something that really hit me or like really stuck with me during this trip in particular was that we got to teach the kids here. And I realized like with at least indigenous, I mean this happens in throughout the Philippines too, but especially in indigenous communities, there's no proper education or no proper system when it comes to like educating like students, because if you see the picture, like you see how large the classroom is. It's a mix of like I think first to or like from considered kindergarten to like second, third grade, and you know you can't really teach the same thing to like a third grader compared to like a kindergartner. Like they should be learning different things, you know, but they're in the same classroom.
Was this a state school?
This was a school. It's recognized by the nation like as like a legitimate school, but it was donated. I forgot by who, but a community member was saying that it was donated. Yeah,
because the reason I asked is that I've seen the issue of like at state schools, there's low resources being put into these communities. I think that's why.
Yeah, because then at least what the community member was telling us was that there's no consistent teacher.
Yes.
So like school would be in session for a week and then no teacher for 3 weeks, and then school is back in session, but then between those 3 weeks those kids lose what they learned, you know, they don't retain it. So there's no consistent teacher, and I mean that's not on the teacher, like that's not her fault or like their fault. So because then they're doing the traveling, and that can get tiring on the individual. So it was just this was my first glimpse at like what indigenous communities are going through when it comes to education.
It's interesting though, because this is in Luzon. What happened in and I know there are now some alternative educational initiatives in Luzon, but in Mindanao it's super strong. They have Salupungan, you've heard of them, and like Alcadev, where they're alternative and they're indigenous schools, but they're very well organized and like to provide the education that the state wasn't providing, like that.
Yeah, because then like with this building, there was only 2 classrooms, and like the day that we were teaching this, like the kids, it was split into 2. So like kindergartners to like 3rd grade, but then the next classroom was like 3rd grade to like 8th grade. And so it's like, again, you can't be teaching the same curriculum. And then again, we were only there for we were only at this community for 3 days. So will those students really retain anything? Like I was teaching, or like the lesson for the day was like the alphabet, and like a lot of students didn't retain the information. So it's like it needs to be consistent teaching and like consistent lessons, but they don't have that. also they don't have the resources. Like a lot of the workbooks were outdated, and like there was only 2 workbooks available for 30 plus kids. So yeah.
Damn, and to think it is 8-hour or how many hours? 9-hour hike?
Yeah, this is a 9-hour hike to get to the community. So if someone wanted to teach here, they would have to live in the community.
Damn.
Yeah, you have to go through like 7 rivers to get to the community. And the rivers were really rough.
What was the reasoning for the military there?
I think it had to do with, if I remember correctly, it had to do with some sort of law that was passed way back when. And it allowed like the American government to occupy that space.
Is it for the joint military exercises?
It is, yeah, because there was a story that I heard from a community member where someone was like going through this like terrain just to get back to the community after getting some supplies, and they were caught in the crossfire and ended up dying.
This is probably close to where we went, or it's probably under the same jurisdiction, because it was also the Aeta community, and it looked exactly like this middle area, where like I think they use it for the Kabataan exercises, and then it's joint military exercises between the U.S., Philippine military, I think Australian even goes there to practice also.
Yeah.
What was your experience like playing with the kids and then going around like seeing that indigenous community?
I specifically with the kids, it's really nice because then it's just nice to like take a break from all of like the information that you're getting and just like, you know, be a kid yourself. Like you get to play games with them, or like we were just running around and everything, and it was just nice teaching them too. I think that's something that I also want to look into when doing community organizing, like teaching little kids, or like at least you know, involvement with the youth, because they still, I think compared to the older generation, they're still very like, you know, eager to learn, and I like that type of like energy and attitude. So I think it was really nice being around kids and seeing their excitement and their willingness to like learn. Like even though, like I remember there was this little girl specifically where she was just not getting the alphabet, like she was very frustrated with herself, but yet she was still going, and it was still something that she wanted to learn. And even though we had a break in between, she came to me and wanted to like continue on the lesson. So I think with kids, it's nice to see that they still have that light in them compared to the older generation. Like I understand why the older generation is like kind of quote unquote jaded, you know. So it's just like refreshing to be around kids with that type of attitude and energy.
I think there is some truth about them having the spirit before like life gets to them. Yeah. Like, and I mean, I can't blame the older folks.
Yeah, exactly.
They see all the issues, right? Especially having to work and everything. But damn, this looks like a great picture. Yeah,
that's one of my favorite pictures from the trip. Again, one of my group members took it on her film camera. Oh yeah, I saw a lot of carabals. That was my first time seeing a carabao in person. Yeah, they're really cute.
They're really.
But they're also like the national animal of the Philippines. So, and I think that's really fitting because even like they're still used for a lot of things.
They're
like,
so useful.
Yeah, like I saw a man using it to farm and like till the land, and like they were moving supplies like with carts on their backs.
They're so, and they've taught them, like this one guy was directing it with just his like making him turn. I'm like, dang, you have a language with this carabao already.
Yeah,
but just with your
yeah.
So, hello Filipino, right?
Pointing with their lips.
Yeah, carabao.
Oh yeah, and they had monkeys.
Where?
Right. If you go back, there's monkeys right there. And I think
here.
Someone was telling me that if they don't have any food, that's their last resort to
the monkey.
Kill and eat the monkey.
Are they tied up?
They're tied up, yeah. There's 2 of them. But then a community member was saying that when they did that for the first time, the other monkeys were crying, so they like definitely don't want to do it again, because they ended up killing the monkey in front of like the other monkeys.
Yeah, and they'll be able to tell.
Yeah, the community members were like saying like, yeah, the monkey was crying, blah blah blah. Like that's why they're our last resort when it comes to food. Like we don't want to kill them because they're like humans. They have feelings too.
Damn.
Yeah. So,
but they must have been going through some like hunger during that time when they did that.
Yeah. So that's also just another issue that I saw too. Just like food insecurity and like the lack of food over there, because again the hike is 9 hours, and so like to get back and forth with supplies on your back is really rough. So.
And they've been there for generations.
Generations after generation, yeah.
Damn. Like, it does put it into context, like, now that we have more on the national scene in the U.S. about the Native American issues, especially when the Dakota Access Pipeline issue was going on.
Yeah.
And then, like, growing up in the Philippines, I never thought of thinking about what are the issues of indigenous groups.
This was my first time being exposed to it. And it's definitely something that I'm still trying to learn more about, because there's just a lot. And this isn't just the only indigenous community out here or out in the Philippines. So yeah, it's definitely something that I want to learn more about. Learn more about self-determination too.
So from like the trying to collate and like get the whole experience down, right? How do you think it has shifted your approach coming back here to the US to community organizing or even your schooling, things like that? Like you said, it's been very pivotal, even for it just being 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Right?
So I definitely have seen, or like at least with me, a lot of the work that I end up involving myself with, like a lot of the time and effort that I put into certain things goes back to the Philippines and like my experiences. So like it was kind of weird coming back too, because then my priorities kind of shifted, because like coming back from the Philippines, I wanted to be a part of Anak Bayan and like get involved with that community, or Gabriela Oakland. Like I wanted to do more of like, I wanted to involve myself more with outside organizations, just because like I was just so involved with the Pil community, and like it's very easy to get like comfortable within the community just because it's within the university, you know. But something that I've learned is that there's communities within the Bay Area, and like they're doing the type of work that like I want to be doing. So my priorities have definitely shifted, where I want to be part of Anak Bayan, but the thing is like I had prior commitments before going to the Philippines. So like, I mean, I'm one of the PCN producers, past too. So like I had these prior commitments, so I don't have a lot of time to be able to fully commit to like being a part of Anak Bayan, you know? So what I do with my prior commitments, so like with PCN, like making it more intentional and having more like educational discussions is what I'm trying to see for the next semester. So like really contextualizing the issues that we discuss on, or like what we perform on stage, you know? Because then it's very easy, at least with my experience in PCN, like being in the space for 3 years, I've seen like a dance, like a cultural dance, just being a cultural dance, you know? Like it's just there to like add that cultural aspect, but what is the reasoning behind that? Or like with the script, like why are certain narratives being portrayed, you know, like what's the historical backing of that? And I kind of want to, as like one of the producers, I want to be able to have a space where like performers and like participants of PCN can come together and like start and educate themselves. Like for example, like PSR is something that I want to implement for like PCN, and making it not like a requirement, but something that's available for students to learn about, you know? Trying to make PCN more of a space where, yes, you can perform and express yourself creatively, but you can also learn along the way. Just providing that space and opening up that dialogue is something that I want to do. And it goes back to my experiences in the Philippines, because it's like not everyone can go on an expo trip, you know, but the most that I can do and provide for like folks here is to like provide those types of discussions, you know, and like try and enlighten them in a way, you know. And it goes with PASS too, with the work that I do in PASS. Like Shadow Weekend didn't happen, it ended up being postponed, but a lot, like the theme was centered around reclaiming what it means to be Filipino, what it means to be Filipino American, or even like folks who weren't Filo identifying, what does it mean to, like, you know, be a person of color in higher education. It goes back to the Philippines again, like there's a lot of narratives about like who's able to go to like a university like UP, you know. So it's just like a lot of the work that I'm involved in right now, even though originally like my intent wasn't because of like the things I learned in the Philippines or learned from the Philippines, like now I could reshape it in a way where it's like melding my experiences from the Philippines with like the work that I do here.
So you're trying to incorporate the lessons, the experiences.
Yeah, try and share that with folks who don't have the opportunity to go on expo trips. Because I think it's really important and valuable knowledge that everyone should have access to. Yeah.
I think I definitely would love to see more folks. Because you were the only one you and Gabby.
Yeah, Gabby.
Were the only one this year from Cal that went, right? Yeah.
At least that's what... Gabby was the only person I met from Berkeley, so...
I mean, yeah, from Berkeley who went this year on like with Kabataan in that group.
I think she went with Anak Bayan, East Bay, yeah.
But y'all... Yeah. Oh, what happened? Does your...
It works.
Still works for you?
Yeah. Did yours stop?
Doesn't work. I don't know why mine doesn't work. But cool. I just want to like end with some questions. Now starting to wrap up. Taking into like account your experience and everything so far.
Should I take off mine too?
No, you can't. No. I actually got another one right there.
Okay, for sure.
What are three pieces of advice that you would give to your younger self?
To my younger self?
Yeah.
Just in general?
Yeah, or I like to kind of frame it around the concept of like how you didn't really have like a tie to your Filipino American identity, and then coming into Cal finding that, then also having another shift after a trip to the Philippines. And then like acknowledging those different like positions that you've been in, and whatever struggle you had and everything.
I think the first thing that came to mind was being comfortable with change. I think growing up, I've been a very like, not traditional, but very like stuck to my ways type of person. Like I like things a certain way, you know, like I'll order the same ice cream. Blah,
What's
blah,
your sign?
I'm a Virgo.
Oh.
Yeah, or like I'm very like I always want a plan, or like I feel like I need a plan, you know? But I think after coming to college and also like going on this expo trip, like it's okay to be confronted by change, and like you should allow change to happen in your life, you know? Like, I mean, after going to the Philippines, like my whole career path just changed, you know? Like I want to go into community organizing.
What did you want to do before?
I actually want to be a social worker, but now I don't find interest in that anymore. But I'm still a social welfare major because, you know, you still gain those types of like quote unquote macro level skills, you know, through like the classes that we're in. So it's still valuable, but I don't want to be involved with social work anymore. It's more like, for me, I want to be able to kind of do more behind the scenes work where it's like really attacking like what's causing the problems in the first place. So like policy making, like reforming policies that have been like consistently like putting marginalized groups towards like the margin again, like just perpetuating that type of cycle. Like I want to attack it at like its focal point. So like just being okay with change and like just inviting it as opposed to being afraid of it. I think that's advice that, like one piece of advice I would give to my younger self, like it's okay if your life path changes, or like it's okay if your values and what you've been thinking has changed. Like again, going back to like that type of unlearning, you know, like sure, like you're kind of like learning all of these new things and it's like very overwhelming, but you need to be able to absorb it and not be like, not stray away from it, you know?
So you were very anti-change before and very...
Not super, but like I was very afraid of it. But now I'm more comfortable with it. Like, yeah, like I want to be able to, you know, like, yeah, sure, I want to go back to the Philippines, but like I want to be able to visit other countries as well. And like as a younger me would be so scared of that, like just being like taking the airplane by myself, like it's just scary. But now it's just like I'm here, like I want to be able to do what I want to do, and if that requires change, then I'll do it, you know.
Dope. So that's one. And
then you asked for three, right?
Yes.
The second one, I think definitely don't hate don't hate the identity you were given. I think I was very bitter and angsty growing up because I was Filipino American. Like it's funny because my cousins still have this same attitude where it's like Filipinos are annoying, you know, the whole like, I think there's memes going around or something like or like back then there was like the swaggy like
Filipino.
Yeah, so it's like that cringy, like I guess, image that Filipinos have. Like I was very like against it, not against it, but like very like I wanted to like disassociate myself from that. But I think now I learn like there's more to being Filipino than that. Like that's just one mainstream image of Filipinos. So I really want to tell my younger self, like, don't hate Filipinos just because of that, and also don't hate yourself because you're Filipino. Like I remember like going back to the whole like I'm a lighter skinned Filipino, and I was always proud of that. Like I remember I had this conversation with Katrina, and we were talking about how like people would often mistaken us as East Asian, and we would take that as a compliment. You know, like, oh yeah, like they didn't think we were Filipino, like we must be like, you know, quote unquote pretty, blah blah blah. So I think just being comfortable in my own skin and like not being shameful of it is what I would tell my younger self. Like, you're Filipino, like you should be proud of that. But I think I wouldn't want to change my experiences of being shameful, because it has taught me to, or like that whole reclaiming process has been very empowering and has been very integral to the person I am today. So like, yeah, I wish younger me was more self-loving, but also like I wouldn't be the person I am today without that, or without going through that. And then the third one, I think it goes back to like privilege too. Like it's very like, even if I don't feel privileged in the United States, like being low income, first gen, woman of color, like I still hold a lot of privileges, and I should utilize those privileges for the better instead of utilizing them and using it for like perpetuating that same corruption or like contributing to the same systems, you know? So I think being able to recognize, like taking a step back, recognizing my privilege and then utilizing it for the betterment of whoever comes my way is a lesson that I would tell my younger self, because younger self was also very selfish. But I mean, it goes back to also just that whole idea of, you know, you want to provide for your family. But then there's also like other people you want to be able to provide for. So, yeah.
I just thought of this. What would you say to your pre-expo self?
Pre-expo
like
self?
Like just this last June or May self when you were preparing for the trip?
I would tell pre-expo Raquel to not be scared, because you're in for a really good, I think you're in for a very like eye-opening and scary, it's like a scary but very eye-opening and necessary experience. Like I remember before going on the trip, I was very hesitant, like what is this gonna do? Like I already knew it was gonna change me in a certain way, but I didn't know to what extent. So I would tell pre-expo Raquel, like, don't be scared. Again, invite change instead of straying away from it.
Interesting that you knew that it would change you. Have you ever had that feeling before going into something like, oh, I know this is gonna change me?
College. Just college, but with this, like, I knew something, because it was something that I knew I wanted to do, and I knew it was gonna change me, but I didn't know how drastic it would be. But I wouldn't have changed it. I wouldn't have changed my experience, and I'm so glad that I ended up going on the trip.
Dope. Do you have any message for maybe somebody who's thinking about going on a trip or anything? Or anyone?
I think before going on an expo trip, or even just like thinking about going on it, you need to understand your purpose and like why you're going, and like why you want to go on this trip. Because I think if you go on an expo trip without a purpose, it's meaningless in a sense. I mean, you could find purpose throughout the whole trip, you know, like you can like end up, you know, finding purpose when you're within a community, like, oh, this is why I'm on this trip, or like, oh, maybe this is the reason why I'm on this trip. But I think before going on the expo trip, it's more powerful to have a purpose. Like, for me, I already knew I was grounded in my identity, and like the purpose of me going on this trip was to really see firsthand, like, what the, like, basically taking what I learned in the classroom and like experiencing it firsthand. That was my purpose of going on the trip, like really seeing it for myself. And I think that's what made the trip powerful, because I knew why I was going on this trip. And I feel like folks should always have a purpose when doing things, because it makes the trip more meaningful. And also, like, if you're gonna go on an expo trip, just be very, again, open to change, because you will be confronted by a lot of cultural differences and just like lifestyle, like differences in lifestyle. So you definitely have to be very open-minded when coming on when going on these expo trips. And also just like live in the moment, like just absorb everything that's in front of you, and like really take the interactions with any individual, and like really just enjoy it. And really just like, yeah, live in the moment, because you're only there in the Philippines for 3 weeks, a month, you know, so really take everything in. And then after the trip, you should definitely like take what you've learned and share your experiences with other folks, because then again, not everyone has the opportunity to go on expo trips.
Dope. What's this called? How would you be down for people to contact you with any questions? Yeah,
I'm actually down for that. I feel like even though it's been, 3-4 months since I've been back, I still find it really hard to try and talk about my experience. Like, I can never find the right words, and I feel like I never will, which is okay, but I'm always open to like telling people about my experience, even if like it's hard for me to describe.
What aspects of the trip do you struggle with in terms of explaining or sharing or like enunciating? I
think when it comes to like the facts of everything, like, oh, NutriAsia is this, or Teletip is going through this, I think it's very easy for me to articulate that, like the issues at hand. But I think for me, I still need time, or like I feel like I'll never really process my true feelings during this trip, or like my true thoughts. I'm not sure why. It's very weird. Like, again, like when I'm trying to describe how I feel, I always end up using the word weird, because that's how I feel. Like, it's very, I just can't find the right words to explain my feelings.
Where's the weirdness coming from? Is it like from being back here? Is it a weirdness of experiencing something there?
I think it's being back here, and also just trying to describe my experience with folks who haven't been on an expo trip, because I think you need to see it firsthand to be able to truly understand like what I went through. But even if like talking to you and like Elizabeth and like folks who have been on expo trips, like even though it's more easier for me to describe, it's still really hard, because we went through different experiences and like we went through different emotions. So I think it's just like a very like expo trips are very personal, and I think that's why it's so hard to articulate.
You'll really be, I think, in a what's the word, like maybe close relationship with the people you were on the trip with.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just nice that we have a group chat together, and like if we're still like having a hard time readjusting, like we can always reach out to each other, which is nice. But I'm open to anyone who has any questions about the expo trip, the Philippines, or just anything. Like I'm a very open person.
How can people get in contact with you?
I mean, I have an email, so my last name, Calara, my first name, Raquel, 98 at berkeley.edu.
98? Yeah. You're born in 1998?
Yeah, I'm young.
Damn.
I'm 20.
1998.
Yeah. It seems far though now.
Yeah, it's 20 years.
It's been 20 years.
Damn, but that was the end of the 90s.
Yeah, it seems like it's only been what? It seems like it's not so far off, but it is in reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you're what?
I'm 28. No, wait. 27
Yeah,
now.
So you're 7 years older than me. So you probably feel hella old when I say I'm born in 98,
Yeah, when
right?
I see 98, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Because I'm 91. Right? And for my whole life, I've always thought I was young. Like, because I'm the youngest in my family.
Oh, okay.
Like that. And then now when it's 98, or I have freshmen who I see on the rosters and they're 2000. I'm
yeah.
like, what?
Yeah, I remember turning 20. I turned 20 like in September, so it was just recently. It just feels weird, like, because then as like a younger kid, you're like, oh, I can't wait to be in my 20s, you know, like it's the most exciting, like it's supposed to be the most exciting part of your life, but then you're here and it's like, ooh, I feel old, like I feel like I should have my shit together. Yeah.
Don't worry. Don't worry.
I'll take it myself. Yeah.
Cool. Do you have any last message to anyone? Any shout out?
I just wanted to say thank you for listening to me talk. I mean, it goes again, like I'm not very articulate when it comes to my experience.
Great. No, you were great. You were great.
But yeah, hit me up if you have any questions about anything. So thank you for having me. No
problem.
It was fun trying to unpack everything with the person. So
still a process.
It is, yeah. So I hope like me talking about my experience like inspires other folks to go on expo trips or just even learn more about the Philippines, whether or not you're pill identifying. Like I think it's very important and rich history that we can't get like through the classrooms, you know. And
in the next few months, join PCN.
Yeah, join PCN. Thanks for the plug. I forgot about that. Next semester, you should look out for auditions. So, yeah, PCN is a good space to be in.
Awesome. Cool.
Well, you're going to be joining, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so Quakers will be there too.
Awesome. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, no problem.
Isang
bagsak. Nice.
Nice. Thanks.